This video is to show you how to use the CNC mill and how to set it up to create one of your projects you've designed on the computer. Before you actually use the mill, you'll want to use your module guide and follow the steps that are in your module guide that show you how to set up the mill in the program. So that's your module guide. You'll want to make sure you're using that. Once you've done that, you'll need to get a piece of stock or a piece that you're going to be cutting from, which looks something like this. It could be a piece of plastic, a piece of foam, or a wax piece like this. So for this video, we're going to do the first project, just showing you how to set up the mill and run the mill. You're going to take that piece of stock and we're going to put that in the machine, and there's a vise that's in the machine that looks like this. This is the one that you'll be putting your piece of stock in, and that's what holds the piece of stock in the machine so that it can be cut. And there's two halves to this vise, and they slide together to hold that piece of stock in place. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the piece of stock in the machine. You want to be sure that the piece of stock isn't angled, it's sitting flat in the machine, and then we're going to take this nut here on the right side and we're going to tighten that just a little bit, And on the left side, we're going to tighten this all the way to get that piece of stock secured. So it shouldn't move, it shouldn't go anywhere, it should sit flat in the vise. Once you have the piece of stock secured, you're going to want to turn on the machine and make sure the door is closed. And it'll take a few seconds for the machine to turn on and to load up. And what you're going to need to do is, once that is loaded up, it's going to start off on the main menu. So we're looking at the main menu here on the computer of the CNC mill. You're going to want to go to manual on the main menu here. So make sure manual is selected and press enter. What we're going to do is we're going to be moving the cutting tool to the starting position on the mill. Now the starting position is right where I have the mill piece in the cutting tool. It's in the bottom left corner, the left corner closest to you, the operator. That's going to be the starting position. So to move that cutting tool around, we have to use the X, Y, and Z buttons on the machine. So the Z buttons move the tool up and down, the Y buttons move the tool back and forth, and the X buttons move the tool left to right. So you'll need to set that tool up so it's right above the piece. And there should be a little gap. It's really hard to see in the video, but there is a little gap between the piece of stock and the cutting tool, and it's on the very, very corner. So when you set it up, you can take a piece of plastic. You take a piece of plastic like this, and it should be able to slide in between the cutting tool and the piece of stock. You can use a piece of paper as well, just something really thin. There should be a little gap. So once you have the machine set up and you've moved that cutting tool over to the right spot, then the last thing you'll need to do is you're going to need to zero the XYZ numbers. So on the machine, on the screen here, there's XYZ numbers right here. Those should all be 0. So after you move that cutting tool to the right spot, you're going to need to press the 0 button right here twice. And the screen should kind of blink. The XYZ numbers should all be 0. They were already 0 because I already had the machine set up, but you want to make sure those are 0 because that's going to tell the machine this is where we need to start cutting from. Once you have the start position set, then you're going to go back to the main menu and you're going to go down to remote serial and press enter, and now you'll be able to download the part for your machine to cut out from the computer. So the next steps will be how to do that on the computer.
For this first activity, running the mill, you're going to need to open up a file located in your student folder. We're going to go to File, Open, and you'll need to navigate to your student folder, your period number, and then CNC Mill. In that folder, you'll find a file named gear.m5. Open that file. What will appear is a blue screen that has the code to cut out this part. So this is just like plotting coordinates on an X, Y coordinate system, but there also are Z coordinates for up and down motions. In order to see this part and to tell if it's going to cut out correctly, you're going to run the emulator. What this does is it shows the part to be cut before you cut it, so that if there's any problems, you don't waste your time cutting the part out or possibly ruining a very expensive piece of material or the machine itself. Tools on the side for viewing are here on the left. You can rotate your piece and you can move that piece around so you can get it on the screen the way you want to view it while it's running. So the brown is the material that we're going to cut, which is a piece of foam, and the green is the cutting tool. So at the top, the controls, we can start the simulation, and it's going to go through each one of those steps. As you notice, there is red and yellow lines that represent where the tool is going to cut, which is the yellow lines, and the red lines are where the tool is traveling without cutting. So as you can see, this first piece is going to look like a gear, and you can turn this to see it all in 3D. Once you have viewed this in the emulator, then you can click on this gray X to close out of the emulator screen and go back to the coding screen. From this point, we can download our part, and we're going to send it to the machine from your computer. So we're going to go to Download Program via Ethernet. And the CNC machine should be found. The machine is not hooked up right now, but once it finds the machine and it says that there's no errors, then you can download that part to the machine. You should have already set up the machine first, so if not, then do not click the download button at this time. If you have any questions, please see your instructor.
Okay, as your computer downloads the parts, you'll notice that it said downloading. It'll take a few seconds for the computer to send the program over to the machine. Once it's done, it's going to say program download complete. Press enter to machine the part, or press escape to go back to the main menu. Well, we're ready to machine the part. So at this point, all you have to do is press that enter key, enter button on the machine. The machine's going to move up 1 inch, and you notice the numbers are changing for the Z. Moved up 1 inch. And it says tool change, fit tool 1, then press enter. We already have tool 1 in the machine. It's just double checking to make sure we have the correct tool. Tool 1 is the small tool that we saw in the machine. It's not very big. That's the tool we're going to be using, so we don't have to do anything else here besides for press enter. Once we press enter, the machine's going to start cutting itself. It's not going to need any more input from you, so we will let it run until it's done cutting. So we're going to press enter on the machine, and it's going to start moving. It's going to start cutting. And if you're going to stand and watch the machine cut, you'll want to use a pair of safety glasses that are in the bin next to the machine. Otherwise, let the machine run. You can exit out of the program on the computer because the machine already has what it needs. And once the machine's done cutting, it'll take a few minutes. You'll want to clean out all that scrap that it's cutting off, all the little pieces. You'll want to vacuum that out first because it'll make a big mess in the machine. It'll be all over, a little harder to clean out. So you'll clean out the machine, turn off the machine, and take the piece out of the vise, make sure the door's closed, and take your part. Once your machine has stopped cutting out the part, you'll want to clean out the machine with the vacuum, and the vacuum is right underneath the table with the CNC mill. So open up the door and take the vacuum and just vacuum out all this shavings that come out of the part as it was being cut. And take the piece out of the vise, just loosen this left side a little bit, loosen the nut on the right side, slide the two halves apart, and you may need to get the vacuum and get that piece a little bit more. And the last thing is to turn off the machine, close the door, and you can take your piece that we've made home.